A bullied teen stood up for a stranger, never imagining it would earn him a full scholarship. The words echoed in Ethan's mind as he stared at the framed certificate hanging in his dorm room, still unable to believe the trajectory his life had taken in just 6 months. 6 months ago, he had been curled against cold metal lockers, trying to make himself invisible. The hallways of Westridge High always seemed to shrink around Ethan Marshall, constricting like a vice whenever he walked through them. Today was no different. He kept his head down, shoulders hunched forward, as if the navy blue hoodie he wore might somehow render him invisible to the predatory gazes that followed him. 17 years old, lanky with perpetually untamed dark hair, Ethan had perfected the art of taking up as little space as possible. "Watch it, freak," came the familiar voice, followed by the equally familiar shoulder check that sent his books scattering across the freshly waxed floor. Laughter erupted around him as Tyler Ramirez and his friends continued down the hall, high-fiving each other as if they'd accomplished something momentous. Ethan's cheeks burned, his fingers trembling slightly as he gathered his scattered belongings. This routine was as much a part of his school day as the morning bell. "Need help?" A soft voice broke through his fog of humiliation. Melissa Chen, one of the few people who acknowledged his existence without malice, was already kneeling beside him, picking up his dog-eared copy of The Grapes of Wrath. "Thanks," he mumbled, unable to meet her eyes. Her kindness somehow made the moment more painful, a spotlight on his weakness. "They're jerks," she said, simply handing him the book. "Don't let them get to you." Easy for her to say. Melissa was well-liked, smart without being threatening, pretty without being intimidating. She existed in a different universe than Ethan, one where people weren't constantly reminding you that you didn't belong. "Yeah, sure," he replied, the words hollow. They both knew it wasn't that simple. The warning bell rang, saving him from further conversation. With a small smile that didn't reach her eyes, Melissa left him to finish gathering his things. Home wasn't much better. The small apartment he shared with his mother was quiet when he arrived, as it often was. His mom worked double shifts at the hospital as a nurse's aide, trying to keep them afloat since his father had walked out 3 years ago. The silence that greeted him was both a relief and a weight. No one to see his shame, but no one to ease it either. He dropped his backpack by the door and went to the kitchen, opening the fridge to find the sandwich his mom had left for him, wrapped in plastic with a yellow sticky note. "Love you, E. Don't forget to start your scholarship applications." "Up, Mom!" The note made his stomach twist. His mother's relentless optimism about his future felt like pressure, even though he knew she meant well. College applications were due in 2 months, and the scholarship forms sat untouched in a folder on his desk. The thought of writing essays about his unique qualities and leadership potential felt like a cosmic joke. What would he say? "I excel at being invisible, except when serving as a human punching bag?" That night he sat at his desk, the glow of his laptop screen illuminating his face as he stared at the blank document. The cursor blinked accusingly. After typing and deleting the opening sentence 12 times, he closed the laptop and crawled into bed, pulling the covers over his head as if they could shield him from tomorrow. Morning arrived with the persistent beep of his alarm. Ethan dragged himself through his routine: shower, dress, choke down some cereal, brush teeth. His mother had already left for her early shift. Another yellow sticky note on the counter. "You've got this, kiddo. Remember, application for the Henderson Scholarship due Friday." The Henderson Scholarship, the holy grail at Westridge, a full ride to any state university of your choice, only awarded to one student each year, based on a combination of academic merit, community service, and a mysterious character component that no one could quite define. It might as well have been on the moon for all the chance Ethan had of reaching it. The day unfolded like most others. Head down, avoid eye contact, flinch at sudden movements, endure the occasional shove or snide comment. By lunch, he had almost made it through unscathed, finding his usual isolated corner of the cafeteria. That's when he saw her, a new girl he didn't recognize, clutching her lunch tray like a shield. She was small, with wild curly hair and glasses too big for her face. Something about her screamed target, and sure enough, Tyler and his crew had already noticed her. Ethan watched as they surrounded her table, saw Tyler's mouth moving, the girl's face crumpling. He saw Tyler pick up her milk carton, tipping it slightly, threatening to pour it over her books. The girl froze, paralyzed with fear. Something hot and electric shot through Ethan's veins. Before he could think, he was on his feet, moving across the cafeteria. Time seemed to slow, the background noise fading to a dull roar in his ears. "Leave her alone." His voice didn't sound like his own. It was steady, louder than he'd spoken in years. Tyler turned, surprise momentarily replacing the cruelty on his face. "Well, look who found his voice." "The ghost speaks." His friends laughed on cue. "She didn't do anything to you," Ethan continued, his heart hammering so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. "Just let her eat in peace." "Or what, Marshall? You gonna stop me?" Tyler stepped closer, using his height advantage to loom over Ethan. The smell of his cologne was overpowering, designed to intimidate as much as his physical presence. Ethan swallowed hard. His hands were trembling, but he curled them into fists at his sides. "Maybe I will." A hush fell over the nearby tables. No one had ever seen Ethan Marshall stand up to anyone, least of all Tyler Ramirez. It was like watching a mouse challenge a hawk. "You know what happens to heroes, Marshall?" Tyler's voice dropped low, meant only for Ethan to hear. "They get destroyed." "Maybe." Ethan's voice was barely a whisper now. "But at least they stand for something." Something flickered in Tyler's eyes. Surprise, perhaps even a flicker of respect. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by his trademark sneer. "Your funeral." He set the milk carton down, hard enough to splash some of its contents onto the table. "Come on," he said to his friends. "The freaks can have each other." They sauntered away, leaving Ethan standing there, adrenaline still coursing through his system, making him lightheaded. "Thank you," the girl said, her voice small but warm. "You didn't have to do that." Ethan finally looked at her properly. Her eyes were red-rimmed behind her glasses, but they were a striking amber color, intelligent and kind. "I'm Maya," she added when he didn't respond. "Ethan," he managed. "And yeah, I did have to do that." A small smile curved her lips. "Well, Ethan, would you like to sit down? I have cookies my mom made. They're really good." He hesitated only a moment before sliding into the seat across from her. As they shared the homemade chocolate chip cookies, Ethan felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. A tiny spark of warmth that felt dangerously like pride. What he didn't notice was the man sitting in the corner of the cafeteria, watching the entire exchange with thoughtful eyes. The next day, Ethan approached the cafeteria with a strange mixture of dread and anticipation. Would Maya be there? Would Tyler be waiting to make good on his threats? He paused at the entrance, scanning the room. "Looking for me?" The voice came from behind him, making him jump. Maya stood there, grinning at his startled expression. "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you. Want to sit together again? I have peanut butter cookies today." Something loosened in Ethan's chest. "Yeah, I'd like that." They found a table in the corner, and for the first time in memory, lunch hour became something Ethan looked forward to rather than endured. Maya was new in town. Her family had moved from Arizona after her father got a job at the local university. She loved science fiction, hated sports, and could talk for hours about astronomy. "I want to work for NASA someday," she confided. "Everyone says it's impossible, but I figure impossible just means no one's done it yet." Her confidence was contagious. Ethan found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone. His secret love of writing poetry, his dream of becoming a journalist, his fear that he'd never escape the small-town boundaries that seemed to be closing in on him. Tyler and his friends kept their distance, though their glares promised that they hadn't forgotten or forgiven. But having Maya beside him somehow made their threats seem less significant. 2 weeks after the cafeteria incident, Ethan was called to the principal's office. His stomach dropped to his shoes as he made the long walk down the administrative hallway. Had Tyler filed some kind of complaint? Was he in trouble for the confrontation? To his surprise, Principal Harrington wasn't alone. Seated across from her desk was an older man in a tweed jacket, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they saw. "Ethan, this is Dr. James Henderson," Principal Harrington said. "He'd like to speak with you." The name hit Ethan like a physical blow. Henderson, as in the Henderson Scholarship, as in the man who personally selected each year's recipient. "Please sit down." "Doctor," Henderson said, his voice gentle but commanding. "I've heard some interesting things about you." Ethan sank into the chair, certain this was some kind of mistake. "About me? I was visiting the school a couple of weeks ago, observing. I saw what happened in the cafeteria." "Doctor," Henderson leaned forward slightly. "It takes courage to stand up for someone you don't even know, especially when you're outnumbered." Heat crept up Ethan's neck. "Anyone would have done it," he mumbled. "But that's just it, Dr. Henderson replied. "No one else did. Just you." The conversation that followed was unlike any Ethan had ever had with an adult. "Doctor?" Henderson asked about his interests, his dreams, his challenges. He listened, really listened, When Ethan haltingly spoke about his passion for writing, his struggle to believe in himself, his fear of the future, "I'd like you to apply for the Henderson Scholarship." "Doctor," Henderson said finally, "the deadline is Friday, as I'm sure you know. But I want you to write something specific for me." Ethan's brow furrowed. "What?" "I want you to write about that moment. The moment you decided to stand up." "What went through your mind? What made you act when everyone else stayed seated? What did it cost you, and what did you gain?" The request was so unexpected that Ethan could only nod. As he left the office, his mind was already racing, words forming and reforming. That night, he sat at his desk and began to write. The words poured out of him, honest and raw. He wrote about the years of feeling invisible, about the shame of being a target, about the moment he saw himself reflected in Maya's fear. He wrote about the strange liberation of standing up, not for himself, but for someone else. He wrote until his hand cramped and his eyes burned, and when he was done, he had 12 pages of pure, unfiltered truth. Friday came, and he submitted his application with trembling hands. Maya waited for him outside the office, bouncing on her toes with excitement. "You did it!" she squealed, hugging him impulsively. "I'm so proud of you." Her enthusiasm was infectious, but Ethan tempered his hopes. "There's no way I'll actually get it." "But doctor, Henderson asked me to apply, so..." He shrugged, trying to seem nonchalant. "Of course you could get it," Maya insisted. "When? Why wouldn't you?" The answer to that seemed so obvious to Ethan that he didn't bother voicing it. Instead, he let Maya drag him to their favorite corner of the library, where they spent their free period talking about anything but scholarships. As the weeks passed, Ethan noticed subtle shifts in his daily life. Tyler's harassment became less frequent, then ceased almost entirely after an incident where he cornered Ethan after gym class, only to find Maya, Melissa, and surprisingly, 2 members of the debate team standing beside him in solidarity. The look of confusion on Tyler's face had been almost comical. "What's happening?" he'd asked, genuinely bewildered. "People are tired of your act." Melissa had replied coolly, "Maybe find a new hobby besides tormenting others." More surprising than Tyler's retreat was the way other students began to acknowledge Ethan in the hallways. A nod here, a hey there. Small gestures, but to someone who had been invisible for so long, they felt monumental. At home, his mother noticed the change too. "You're different," she said one evening as they ate dinner together, a rare occurrence with her schedule. "More present." Ethan shrugged, but couldn't hide his small smile. "I made some friends. That Maya girl who calls here?" His mother's eyes crinkled with affection. "She sounds lovely." "She is," Ethan agreed, feeling a now familiar warmth spread through his chest at the thought of Maya's laugh, her boundless enthusiasm, her unflinching loyalty. The night of the scholarship announcement arrived with a formal ceremony in the school auditorium. Ethan sat between his mother and Maya, his palms sweaty, his collar too tight. He had polished his only pair of dress shoes until they gleamed, and Maya had helped him select a tie that brought out the blue in his eyes. "You look great," she whispered, squeezing his hand, "no matter what happens tonight." "Doctor," Henderson took the stage after several introductory speeches. He stood at the podium, his presence commanding attention without demanding it. "The Henderson Scholarship was founded on a simple principle," he began. "That character matters as much as academics. That who you are is as important as what you know." He paused, his gaze sweeping the audience. "This year's recipient exemplifies that principle in a way that moved me deeply." Ethan's heart was pounding so hard he could barely hear the words over the rush of blood in his ears. This young person showed courage when it would have been easier to remain silent. Showed compassion when indifference was the safer choice. Showed character when it mattered most. "Doctor, que faut-il?" Henderson's eyes seemed to find Ethan in the crowd. "The recipient of this year's full scholarship is Ethan Marshall." The world tilted sideways. His mother's gasp, Maya's delighted squeal, the applause that followed, all of it reached him as if through water. Someone nudged him, and he rose on unsteady legs, making his way to the stage. "Doctor," Henderson shook his hand firmly, passing him a certificate. "Your essay was extraordinary," he said quietly, "but your actions spoke even louder. Congratulations." Ethan turned to face the audience, certificate in hand. Through tear-blurred vision, he saw his mother, hands clasped to her mouth, eyes shining with pride. Beside her, Maya was on her feet, applauding wildly. And scattered throughout the auditorium were faces, some familiar, some not, all looking at him with something he had never experienced before: respect. In that moment, standing under the bright lights, Ethan understood something fundamental. The scholarship wasn't just about college, it was about being seen. Truly seen, perhaps for the first time in his life. The following Monday, Ethan walked into school with his head held higher. The certificate was framed on his wall at home, a tangible reminder that everything had changed. But the real change was inside him, a quiet confidence that came not from external validation, but from knowing he had done the right thing when it mattered. Tyler was waiting by his locker, alone for once. Ethan tensed, preparing for confrontation, but Tyler's posture wasn't threatening. "Congratulations," Tyler said stiffly. About the scholarship, Ethan studied him, searching for sarcasm or malice, but found none. "Thanks," he replied cautiously. "What you did for that new girl." Tyler hesitated, looking uncomfortable. "It made me think about some stuff." Ethan waited, uncertain where this was going. "Anyway, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for how I treated you." The words seemed to physically pain Tyler, but they were sincere. Surprise rendered Ethan momentarily speechless. "I appreciate that," he finally managed. An awkward silence stretched between them. "Well, see you around," Tyler said and walked away. Ethan watched him go, a strange sense of completion washing over him. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, that would take time, but it was a beginning, a recognition that people could change, himself included. Maya appeared at his side, slipping her hand into his with the easy familiarity they'd developed. Was that Tyler apologizing? Did I enter an alternate dimension? Ethan laughed, squeezing her hand. Maybe we all did. As they walked to class together, Ethan reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had led him here. 6 months ago, he had been invisible, curled against cold metal lockers, trying to disappear. Now he walked the same hallways with his head high, hand in hand with a girl who saw him completely, a future unfolding before him that he could actually imagine inhabiting. All because he had stood up for a stranger. All because, for one crucial moment, he had chosen courage over fear. Outside, spring sunlight streamed through the windows, warming the corridors that had once felt so hostile. Ethan welcomed the heat on his face, the brightness that seemed to mirror the expanding warmth in his own chest. Sometimes, he was learning, the most important transformations began with the smallest acts of bravery. And sometimes those acts changed everything.